Most productivity books, it's all about processing stuff faster, but it's not really the right stuff. A lot of these apps now that automate your calendar, all it does is it just keeps you busier better. Whereas as a fighter pilot, everything you do is, how can I be less busy? Because if I'm busy, I'm task saturated. If I'm task saturated, I can't think clearly. If I can't think clearly, I'm going to get shot down or hit the ground. So you're constantly shedding. You're saying, do less, do less, do less. And by doing less, you achieve more.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. Today, I'm extremely honored to have Christian Boucousis with us. From the cockpit of a fighter jet to the boardroom of multi-million-dollar enterprises, this guy has advised, and his team has helped build NFL championship teams and have helped incredible companies 10x their businesses. He is all about purpose, adaptability, and get it done mindset. Excited to get started, Boo. Thanks for being here.
Mate, happy to be here, Avetis. Thank you so much, and congratulations as well. I had a little stalk at your career and where you've been, and you've done some great things. Your organisation is absolutely firing. You do great service for the tech industry.
I appreciate that, brother. Yeah, let's talk about how you began this journey, right? I mean, like, how do you go from where you started to where you are today? Very unique story.
Yes, look, I think very lucky. I mean, imagine the thing you dreamed of being when you're a kid, right? And you always wanted to be something. And then you became it. So I wanted to be a fighter pilot from when I was a kid, 5 years of age. And never wanted to be anything else. I never thought I would be anything else. I was just always going to be a fighter pilot, and that was the end of the story, which was quite lucky because who I am and my kind of makeup is I have ADHD, which I only found out a few years ago. And I think I was very fortunate in that the universe gave me this sense of purpose at a young age. Forced me to focus through school that I was miserable at, really bad academically, very, very hopeless at behavioral learning, but managed to just squeak through with the minimum marks I needed to become a fighter pilot. And that was when I was 19. So, I started flying the fighter jets themselves when I turned 21, but you got to do all your pilot training and all the other bits and bobs before you become a fighter pilot. But that was a 17-year journey from making a decision to be one to being one, and I think one of the things I've certainly learned as I hit 50 this year is the fulfilling your life's purpose is a long game, not a short game. 11 years. Then the universe threw me another curveball. I lost the ability to fly. I had an autoimmune disease that affected me for a long time. Like the whole time I was flying, it was like arthritis. So flying these jets with high G was really, really uncomfortable. And finally, it wasn't just all pilots suffer from pain. It's a ridiculous environment. Under G, you weigh around 1,500 to 1,800 pounds. So it's a lot of pressure on your bones, your brain. And I just thought it was normal fighter pilot pain, but turns out I had this autoimmune disease. It's an inflammatory disease, the same class as Crohn's disease. Not good for flying. And that's when I started business. I really started in business because I had no choice. I had no ambitions to be in business. I'd never had a dream to be an entrepreneur or any of that sort of stuff. I just decided when I couldn't be a fighter pilot, I was going to be in business. I'll be the fighter pilot of business people. And that was, an entrepreneur and a business founder. So I started my first business, which was a humanitarian business in the Middle East, in Afghanistan. And from there, that was 20 years ago. I've been in humanitarian world. I've been in construction and property development. I have been in publishing. And today, about 10 years ago, I became involved with an organization called Afterburner that takes fighter pilot mindset and the way that we work as individuals and as teams. And we work with organizations to help lift their performance, but basically speed them up. And I was doing that in Australia and Asia as a bit of a side hustle to my other businesses. And last year I had the opportunity to acquire the company and move to the US. That's why I'm here in Miami now, where the company's based. It's called Afterburner. And we give organizations insight into fighter pilot mindset, a unique way of thinking. And most importantly, we know in the world there's a lot of personal development. A lot of people invest in themselves, and because there's a certain cost to that, where we underdevelop is with teams and the people around us. So one of the challenges when you're a real hard charger, a high performer, and you're all about learning and growth, is you often leave the people around you behind. So we're about sharing that growth journey with as many people as possible. The kind of Moneyball approach, right? Where a team of a championship team is better than a team of champions and talented people. And we've worked with some phenomenal brands. Technology and pharma are our two biggest market sectors that we work with. High consequence, high speed, a lot of impact for failure to execute. So we do a lot of work in those spaces to help people think faster and execute faster still.
Boo, so first of all, thank you for that. You said something interesting. You talked about speed them up, right? Just to show you how important speeding them up is. Every 18 months, technology goes 3 times faster from what I've heard, at half the cost. So let's talk about how important speed is, right? I don't know much about the pharma industry, but I know tech really, really well. And speed is everything, right? So I definitely want to get into that. But before we get into that, let's talk about you getting into becoming a fighter pilot, right? I mean, talk about no plan B. I am sure along the way you had loved ones who cared about you and you respect to tell you, what the hell are you doing? You're not going to be a fighter pilot. What are you thinking, right? No one becomes a pilot. You're talking about fighter pilot. Or they told you, sounds good, son. You know, that's really cool. Let's come up with a plan B. What's your contingency plan? What did you do with that information?
Yeah, I mean, even my dad didn't think I was gonna make it. My mum did, but mum, a bit of a mum's boy, so always had her in my corner. I just didn't. There was no plan B. Your dad said I should get a university degree. I did go to university for 6 weeks. I hated it. I walked out in the middle. I was studying a Bachelor of Science, majoring in mathematics, which was the kind of the worst thing I could ever do. I remember just walking up in the middle of a calculus class and just leaving and never coming back. And then when I left uni, I just got 2 jobs. I got a job Monday to Friday where I was just mowing lawns for a living and working for a guy that had a bunch of young, I was only, in Australia, you leave school at 17. So I was only 17, 18 at the time. And Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was working in a bar. So I was, on those days, I was up at 5, mowing lawns, working in the bar, I'd get home at 2, be up again the next morning at 5. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was getting 3 hours of sleep per night. Then I'd catch up a bit during the week, and all the money that I was making in that, which was good money. I was working on weekends. I'm Australian. You can tell by my accent. Back in Australia, you get penalty rates when you work on weekends and at weird hours. So you're making like 3 times per hour what anyone else is. And I was just putting all of that into a bank account, and then every now and again, I'd take a break on the weekends, or I'd only mow in the morning or in the afternoon, and I was learning to fly. I was just paying my own way. So I guess if you said, what was my backup plan? The backup plan was to be a pilot, maybe not a fighter pilot, but a pilot. But that, back in the day, that was a $100,000 investment. Today, it's a $300,000 investment. That's what it costs to pay your own way through to be an airline pilot, which is why so many airlines have academies now. But it was never not going to be one. Did I feel at times that it was slipping through my fingers? Yes. But did I ever feel like it was going to fall through? I had some I have ADHD, right? So I don't have a very strong sense of consequence with things. I just do it, right? So as I went through, one of the biggest challenge and the feedback I got from my instructors was, hey, you've got a bit of a cavalier attitude, we don't want you to have an accident, because we call it NAFOD, no apparent fear of death. And what was interesting was that's how I was perceived, but my internal monologue was I was very safe and very cautious. I was just always upbeat and always like, just shrugging off, it'll be right, we'll be right. And that served me well, because you can get in a bit of a spiral as a fighter pilot. What we do at Afterburner, what we do with this company is bring that mindset and training methodology into business, right? So as a fighter pilot, right, you've got around 18 months to go from an idiot off the street, 19-year-old kid, right, that can like literally do their shoelaces up, and in 18 months pop out to fly a 20-ton machine that flies at the speed of sound in combat, right? So you've got 18 months on that journey. So what we call it is the accelerated learning curve, and what we bring as Afterburner to the table, and I think what all fighter pilots bring to any conversation, any organization, is you literally think 3 times faster. You are 3 times ahead. There was a study done, organizational of group effectiveness in New York, that looked at learning curves and feedback models, and the fighter pilot models can create 300% more growth than normal models of growth, right? So what I've certainly found as a business owner, and it didn't work at first, was I always thought everyone worked at the speed of me. And I'm not fast by nature, or I'm not special. I was just taught to think very fast and to understand the value of situational awareness. So basically, invest in things that made sense, and if things didn't make sense, to invest until they did, and if they didn't, then they mustn't make sense. Just don't invest in it. So anywhere there's ambiguity, anywhere there's complexity, make it simple or just walk away. And I think that's a really great. A really great element to the fighter pilot mindset is that don't waste your time. Time is absolutely precious. You've got 200 airplanes on a mission. I was a mission commander. You might be in command of 200 airplanes, and every one of those has to be in the right piece of sky at the right time within plus or minus 5 seconds. Okay,
man.
And
this was the Royal Australian Air Force that you were.
Yeah, but we interoperated, right? So we're about half the time is Australian and half the time is interoperating with the US forces, the British. We were always a coalition, okay? So there was, and this is the incredible thing. I mean, you think about a technology company, right? You think of a company like Atlassian. Let's pick an Aussie company.
Sure.
If you work at Atlassian in California, and you fly from Palo Alto to Sydney in Australia, you can expect about a 3-month, 6-month kind of process to integrate. You can take a US Air Force squadron from California, Alaska, flight to Sydney, Australia, and with 24 hours, be completely interoperable, everything fully synchronized, and we can do the same. So the Western Air Forces are completely aligned, standardized, and it means that we can be incredibly effective and creative because we have the basics ironed out. So what's that? That's an accelerator. What else is an accelerator? Trust, okay? What's trust? Trust is doing what you say you're going to do. So when you wander around as a fighter pilot and hang out with other fighter pilots, work with other organizations, you might be working with a bunch of Italian fighter pilots. You have instant trust because you understand that everyone is a known quantity. And that instant trust is what allows you to seamlessly integrate within 24 hours and go on a mission and be flying in cloud where you can't even see each other within 1,000 feet whilst you're doing 1,200 miles per hour.
Wow.
It's a world that has absolutely zero familiarity on the ground. You can't be ground bound and comprehend what thinking and execution looks like in 3 dimensions at that sort of speed. So where I think it's very important in technology right now is we have 2 diametrically opposing forces. Yeah, we have speed of automation and digitization, and then we've got information, which is increasing. The amount of information we create per second is increasing, and the amount we need to execute per second is increasing. So they're mutually exclusive, right? Like if you had to read an instruction manual and you had 10 seconds before you had to go and do an obstacle course that was life or death, but it took you a minute to read the instructions, you're not going to execute the obstacle course very well. But if someone said to you, hey, these are the top 3 things you need to read in that book, and you read it in 10 seconds, you'll execute much faster. So that's called knowledge and wisdom. And the ability to do that is what fighter pilots do. They say, here's 6,000 pages you need to be an effective fighter pilot, but we've distilled it down to these 100 pages. So if you know that, you're going to be 80% there. And the rest of your career, you're going to learn the other 6,000 pages. So I think where we're at with humanity right now is we're at this precipice of overwhelm, which is trying to to process vast amounts of information in very limited time. And that's where fighter pilot mindset can offer value.
Boo, let's bring that to the boardroom, right? So it's at what point, what are some things it hit you that, hey, what I learned as a fighter pilot, I can easily execute in a business, and here's why. I believe that businesses are flawed for these reasons, and this is why they don't grow, and here's how we solve it by using the fighter pilot kind of method or mindset. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's creating clarity, the situational awareness. So it's starting with what impact are we trying to make. So we do a lot of coaching, we do a lot of performance improvement, where we're a fly on a wall for 3 months at an organization, and we just help fine tune those leaders through that 3 month process. You have to understand, and it's written in the book On Time on Target. We work with 19 NFL teams. 3 of them won Super Bowls, right? The New York Giants, the Denver Broncos, and the Philadelphia Eagles. And what you learn, there's 2 things you learn. The first one is those 3 teams were the only 3 teams in the NFL that committed to the process. The rest just got us in to do a keynote to tick a box for player development. Right? So the first one is belief. So to perform well, you have to believe. And that's not their fault. Why would they believe a bunch of fighter pilots could do any good? The companies that believe read the book, and they understood the depth of what we were bringing to the table. Home Depot, Afterburner's very first client, 1996, fully invested in the program for many, many years and scaled it up. So every store manager in Home Depot was trained by fighter pilot. Why? Because they had to scale from 200 store owners in Georgia as a small-ish hardware store to 2,000 very, very quickly. The weakest link with Home Depot's scaling was their ability to maintain that family environment, the ability when you're walking through the aisles for someone to know exactly where that particular widget is and that nut in that particular aisle, which is easy to do when you're a small family operation, but to scale that rapidly, they relied on the fighter pilot training model to be able to do that. So we've worked with 3,500 businesses, right? VMware, we shepherded through 8 years of their growth and merger and acquisitions. We work with the likes of Vonage, Google. We're constantly in and out of Google, working with a few of their leaders who are at the very, very top of the organization, that as their team starts to grow and as they start to get that turnover, a lot of turnover in technology, at around that 3-year mark, they get us back in to bring the team back together, give them the fighter pilot mindset, the ways of working. There isn't an element of business that really can't be lifted with fighter pilot mindset, because everything, even technology, is still a human endeavor. The way we integrate with generative AI, the large language models, whatever you want to call the technical term, it's still reliant on stuff that was created by a human before. It's still taking technology and trying to humanize it, right? So it doesn't matter what technology is, it always requires a human interface. And if you look at fighter pilots, that's the cutting edge of technology and machine, because you don't have to use technology in business and have it go upside down for the dynamic of the technology to change instantaneously. Once you start looking at speed, height, and attitude, the direction you're flying, every microsecond, the dynamics of your environment are changing. That's where aviation and fighter pilots value technology. And what we value from technology, and this is what we tell a lot of the tech companies we work with, is the best technology has the least amount of features. That's hands down.
Simplicity.
Stop building technology with thousands of add-ons. It reduces the reputational value of your product. It becomes unusable. If your technology can be turn on, deliver value, turn off with zero input, that's the best form. That's technology. That is the best man-machine interface you can have. And if you look at the 5th generation fighter pilots that we have now, flying the stealth fighter jets, and they have their $500,000 helmets on. The latest generation of fighter jets is designed purely to provide situational awareness to a pilot, which is the right information at the right time that enables them to make a great decision. and the decision equals the impact in battle that they're trying to achieve. So situational awareness always starts with a question, which is, what's the point? What's the point of this technology? What decision is it going to enable? Whereas I think a lot of technology comes from, what work is this going to do? And you end up engineering a piece of automation that works like a human rather than say, hey, what's the impact you're trying to achieve? And that's what we train technology companies to do. Most of the time, it's about improving an existing system rather than coming up with a mission objective, which is, this is what the technology needs to do. Now let's re-engineer the automation to achieve that particular outcome.
Boo, question for you. I mean, I've never seen someone work with such a variance type of organizations. You talked about Home Depot, which is a hardware store, VMware, which is a technology company, obviously Google and Atlassian Suites and all these. And then you talk about NFL teams. So it's incredible how many different organizations you've seen. But I always say leadership is leadership, right? And teams are teams and all that. So I guess my question to you is, what are 3 things that you found companies are doing incorrectly that or not doing well that's slowing down their growth and potentially eventually killing them, right? Because most businesses, if you don't grow, you die. Tell me 3 things that you noticed.
Yeah, and that's, we have a saying as fighter pilots, speed is life. That like we have to maintain speed. You have to stay ahead all the time. The minute you slow down, the minute you get stuck, you get shot out of the sky, right? So that analogy works for everything in life. It's the same in a relationship with a partner. If you fail to grow and you fail to invest in your relationship, if you stay the same person you are at 25 when you meet your wife or your husband, your relationship's going to die. Like, everyone needs to go forward. The challenge now is you don't have a choice about speed. The speed is happening whether you want to or not. Like, you're just going to get left behind. So to go back to your question about what are the 3 things companies are doing that's getting in the way. The first is an underinvestment in what's the point in strategy. And I can tell you this because we've done over 100,000 debriefs of 3,500 companies of all over the world, of everything you can possibly imagine. And we distilled on the back of that, there's 9 reasons why companies fail. 85% of the issues in a company come down to these 9 things. Of the 9 things, over half of them are related to planning, whether it's strategic planning, whether it's project planning, whether it's a planning methodology or a lack of methodology, or a systemized way in which to execute a plan. So that's 4 out of 9, all related to things that you can control. Underinvestment in planning, or overly ambitious plans that are so vague that they actually introduce conflict. So most organizations have a meeting culture, a Zoom culture, because we're constantly seeking clarification of what's going on. And where we see this disengagement in the modern youth workforce, the disengagement comes from a complete lack of awareness around what, if I invest time and effort, what's going to happen? I'm just going to sit here and do nothing until someone tells me what to do. So fighter pilot mindset's getting ahead of the airplane. It's allowing people to have autonomy and to create the work that delivers the outcome. Whereas businesses are behind the airplane. They're reacting to they're reacting to the business. They're waiting until they fly into a cloud before they start to maneuver the aircraft out of the cloud rather than avoiding it in the first place. They're focused on the target, and instead of pulling away from the ground after the bombs come off, they fly the airplane into the ground. They become fixated. And what we've learned is the thing about flying fighter jets and the thing about running a business is it's all about how humans behave. And when you're from a world where the behavior is very obvious, the human shortfalls that we have, you build a system to stop the shortfalls from killing you or someone else. In business, the shortfalls are hidden through excuses, through politics, through relationships. We hide them all. They just sit under the parapet. So when it comes to businesses, you have to understand that there's 2 speeds that you can operate a business. There's the slow speed, the bureaucracy. It's not going to go anywhere, right? That's the human condition. So that's not going to go anywhere. And you have that as a fighter pilot, you have that as well. That's when you're not flying. That's when you're working with the rest of the military, the rest of the team. We're just human beings, right? We're pretty difficult to deal with. So you've got to create the second speed system, which is what we call the flawless execution system. And that's where you're very focused on outcome and very focused on a culture that we call nameless and rankless. So that's a culture where in that moment, because we're so clear around where we're going, because we've invested the time in these really clear plans, that when things start to go off the rails, we have a really good template to come back to. And we're not focusing on who's right. We're not having these opinion-based conversations. We're focused on what's right. And what we see in organizations is we can pretty much reduce meeting culture by 2/3. We can go from an organization that has around 30 hours of meeting. And this is, as a leader today, that's how many hours you're spending in meetings on average, 30 to 32 hours, right? That we can get the leaders down to about 12 hours of meetings in a week. That's it. And there's some technical detail around that. We have this concept called the X gap. And the X gap is the gap between your strategy, what you want, and where you are, your results, right? So when you have this gap, we promote curiosity and we ask, hey, why is there a gap in, rather than get stressed about it, we say, hey, why is that gap there? And what can I do about it? What action can I take? And we turn that into a little mnemonic called ORCA, ORCA. What's the objective? What's the result? What's the cause or curiosity? And what's the action? And if that's how fighter pilots think. You know, I was in a coffee shop the other day. We were working with, we're up in Boston working with Sanofi, one of the big pharma companies, right? They're got a huge facility up there. And we're working with a bunch of leaders there. And we went to get a coffee. And we went into the coffee and it was a big line. And there were 4 staff working in the behind the counter. And they were all busy, but they are completely ineffective. And me and this other fighter pilot, he said to me, within 30 seconds, 4 things that he could have done differently. And then we sat down for a coffee, and he says, what is it about us, Boo? His name was Balls. He said, every time we go somewhere, everything we look at, our instant response is, how can this be done better? And that's what that ORCA response is. Yeah, I worked in an organization that had a $3.6 billion run budget, right, for their technology, yeah? The industry average was 1.2. So they're 3 times over budget. They had 48,000 staff. They had 2,000 apps to run the business. And they realized, actually, we only need 200. So the first thing you ask is, how on earth did you get to 2,000? How on earth did you get that, which is 10 apps to do the one job in every function of the business? How did that happen? So the first thing there was they were an innovative organization. They promoted innovation, which meant they gave everyone in the organization a mandate to do whatever the hell they wanted, as long as it was innovative. So we don't have an innovation issue. We have an execution of innovation issue. So that was the first thing, right? The second thing was there was no one asked, what's the point of the what are we trying to achieve here? So we worked with them for 18 months on a simplification program direct to the CIO, where we helped them get down from 2,000 to 200. And we did that in 18 months. They had an 8,000 change backlog when we started. Okay. And you know technology, I mean, you think about that, getting from a 3.6 bill run to 1.2 and 2,000 apps in only 18 months.
Wow. Think about the valuation increase and the efficiency differences. Speaking of, let's talk about that. You're big on the GID mindset, right? Get it done. And it seems like it's more than just a mantra for you. It seems like it's like a way of living because you're obsessed with it. Like you said, you and your buddy were at a coffee shop and you were frustrated with the inefficiencies. Tell me a little bit about that and how can teams adopt this mindset, this agile, this quick get it done mindset today? Give us a method.
It's interesting. And a little nuance there, because you mentioned we were frustrated by what was going on at the cafe. What's interesting with us, we're not frustrated at all. We couldn't care less. But it's the default of wanting to help and wanting to help lift, you know. So that's what the GID mindset is. And maybe 6 years ago was really only when I started unpacking why fighter pilots do this, why we work this way. Prior to that, we just did it, right? And I just did it in my own businesses. But then I started to look at why. And when you start to look at why it works, the first one is most productivity books get shit done, get stuff done highly effective people. It's all about processing stuff faster. But it's not really the right stuff. It's building the right, a lot of these apps now that automate your calendar, all it does is it just keeps you busier better. Whereas as a fighter pilot, everything you do is, how can I be less busy? Because if I'm busy, I'm task saturated. If I'm task saturated, I can't think clearly. If I can't think clearly, I'm going to get shot down or hit the ground. So you're constantly shedding. You're saying, do less, do less, do less. And by doing less, you achieve more. Because you've got the clarity to make better decisions. So 50 to 60% of what we do each day is complete waste of time or backwards work. It creates more work. So get it done mindset is figure out what it is and then do it. So plan it, execute it, and then two things happen. One, it's gone. And two, you've just built an enormous amount of trust in the people around you. Because every time we deliver what we say we're going to do, and you do it again and again and again, you create the highest trust organizations on earth. It's so high trust that, to go back to that story, that an American squadron comes to Australia, they literally walk in the door, walk upstairs. We do a quick familiarity brief. We spend 2 or 3 hours just telling them how it works here. Then that American pilot is leading a bunch of Australians from their home base, and we can implicitly trust every word that comes out of that guy's mouth. Don't even know who he is. Never met him before.
Wow. So, Boo, it sounds like what's happening is there's a planning problem here, right? What organizations are doing, if I can kind of summarize for myself, my own learning, is we're executing without planning well. And so what ends up happening is the team is just trying to react to the leader's constant kind of go figure stuff out model, right? And so there's not a lot of pre-planning, a lot of strategy. And so what ends up happening is you end up being very busy just doing work. And not all this work actually means anything. Did I summarize that well?
It is. There's what word business should be using instead of planning is a word called intention. They build a lot of intention, but they don't plan. A plan is connecting the intention to action.
I like that. Okay. So that's the key. Because yes, what ends up happening is you meet all the time, way too often, and not much is accomplished, right? Because all they're trying to do is to get clarity, like you said, instead of planning really well, tying intention into the action, and then people go, right?
Yeah. And that's what we distilled from the world of fighter pilots in Afterburner. That's the whole point of it. We lean into the art of strategy, the intentional side. We call it a high definition destination. That is where you're going. The reason we're doing these 10 missions is to win this war. The reason we're flying into that island is to make sure we drop off food and that everyone can eat and survive after a natural disaster. So your HDD is your intentional, to paraphrase Jim Collins or to reference Jim Collins, your big, hairy, audacious goal, right? It's the storytelling side of execution, and we're pretty good at that. Most people want to work for Nike or an airline or Google because the story's a good one, yeah? And they're pretty good at doing intention as well. And that's what people like doing it. Most people actually want to work each day and achieve something. Most people don't want to come in and waste their time. So we call that, so that's the intentional side, high definition destination. That's where we're going, right? That's the art of strategy. But then we click that into the science of execution, and that's the plan, brief, execute, debrief cycle. So fighter pilots plan every day. So if I'm about to make an effort, I plan the effort first. Whereas a business will plan on a quarter, have freedom in a framework, and everyone just bimbles around for a quarter. And then we have meetings trying to bring the cats back together into the herd. And really, it's just freaking chaos. It's exhausting for a leader to do that. It's very frustrating. So we create the time and the space. We intentionally create an execution rhythm. We kick the week off with intentional planning, which is very action-based. We check in every day to debrief, where we ask ourselves that ORCA question, is what happened today, what we're expecting. It's not onerous. This can be a 5-minute conversation. It's not onerous at all. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create speed. And when we debrief everything, what we find is the small things that are a bit more time-consuming, we put that onto an off-ramp and we go, okay, well, we're not going to solve that in 5 minutes, but we're going to put the effort there now. So we're going to deploy a team. really go intense on that problem for the next hour and fix it, and then come back together. So it's creating this elasticity or balance between speed, but also being deliberate. So not being reckless. It's not being the sort of speed where you're on a road with someone else in their hot hatch 4-cylinder car. We're talking about Formula One speed, where everything knows. You mentioned before about being agile. I was doing a podcast the other day. Great terminology was anticipatory. So you don't want agile organizations. You want anticipatory organizations. And I think that's fantastic, because agile still means you're reacting, not adapting. And again, a fighter pilot, an airplane is agile because it needs to be when everything goes wrong. And that's where technology and business they're using a technique designed because it was built by Jeff Sutherland. It was created by a fighter pilot, Agile. They're using a tool and a mindset to rescue you when the shit goes down as the model to run your whole business. So can you imagine? Can you imagine that any other organization or any other sport where the whole thing is using the methodology someone uses to get out of jail when it all goes pear-shaped? Fighter pilots, we don't use agility when we're fighting the mission. We're very calm. The cockpit is quiet. Everything happens as per the plan. And then inevitably, every mission a little bit goes off the plan. We have the headspace, the patience and the calm to anticipate and get ourselves into a position of advantage to exploit that opportunity. So Agile in itself is a flawed mindset to bring into technology. Can you say that? Absolutely not, because of the billions of dollars that are invested in it. We work with platforms we work with Atlassian and Jira and Epics and Stories. And when you come in as a fighter pilot, why have you just made this very simple thing we're trying to do, implement a change, and engineer it into this multi-layered complex structure? There's two things you do in a business. Technology does two things and two things only. Defines the objective, what's the point of it, and then it does stuff to get there. That is it. That's all you need. You don't need any more layers than that.
But then they wouldn't be able to sell products, Boo. That's the whole concept behind all these crazy tools, right? That's the whole concept, is keep you drowning so that they can throw little lifelines at you versus solving the issue, which is we're not actually stop reacting, basically, right?
Correct. And that's why that's the difference between technology and technology businesses. I mean, technology businesses sell like any other business to a person's ego, where I need the technology to do something different for me. Every fighter pilot flies exactly the same airplane, and every airplane has a different result because of the skill of the fighter pilot.
Sure.
Whereas technology tries to build a unique fighter pilot for a shitty pilot, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Boo, tell me about this deep performance mindset versus high performance model. Like, what can you tell me about that?
Again, high performance is a story. It's a story where if only we had talent, if only we had an incredible person, we wouldn't have to worry about getting all the basics right and working well together. We wouldn't have to worry about investing in training. We wouldn't have to worry about doing things right. We wouldn't have to worry about being very open and honest with each other and helping each other. I call it the Avenger mindset, where if we can do whatever we want in this business, we can run it into the ground, we can go out and run up the expense account, we can use it to live our best lives. And when it all goes pear-shaped, we're just going to fly in some Avengers and they're going to fix it. That's high performance. High performance is someone is going to rescue the show. And there's a great study. It's on my website. It's called the 400 Percenters. And there are people that are uniquely equipped with more brain power, more energy, and more dysfunction in their life that they feel compelled to work really, really hard to prove themselves, right? To fill a hole in their life. I'm one of them, so I'm not talking out of school. And those 10% are 3 times more effective than most people. They deliver 25% of the output in the company. But they're very difficult to deal with. They create a lot of problems as well. And that's me. That's why I've had my own business for 20 years. I had a job during COVID. I missed flying. And I went back as an employee to a company that flew jets in the military, flew basically baddies. We were the bad guys. And it just did my head in, like working in that environment. Like it just drove me crazy. So deep performance is about, it's the Moneyball approach, right? It's the, if we're all above average, that will beat one or two high performers in a team of 20 every day of the week. And deep performance is the model fighter pilots have. If you're talented and you're not a hard worker as a fighter pilot, or if you're talented and you don't invest in the basics, you get suspended. There is so many talented pilots that get chopped off the program, and there's two off my course, and you're just like blown away that these people. But the Air Force knows that when you put those people into a team, you can create a toxic environment. So it's all about fighter pilot
high performance,
mindset.
high drama, right? That's also toxic.
Yeah, and also the mindset, if it comes easy, they know that when it really comes to saving a life, to investing, to digging deep, a talented person, we can't afford the margins. We just make black and white decisions. On average, of course, there's Michael Jordans. Of course, there's highly talented people that invest in the basics and they become the greatest of all time, the Tom Bradys. There are very, very few of those, though. That is a deep performing high performer, right? So deep performance are these, it's the teams that consistently, in an environment of high performance, the teams that consistently outperform, okay, within that environment. That's a deep performance team. Warren Buffett is a deep performer. Ray Dalio is a deep performer. And if you look at Ray Dalio's principles, if you read his book, they're very similar to how fighter pilots think. He has the same radical transparency that we call nameless and rankless. He has some philosophies that really drive accountability, not forced accountability, desired accountability, and a peer group that's supportive of that accountability and wants to lift as a collective. You have a higher turnover with a deep performing mindset, but it's a self-selecting turnover. Very rarely does anyone get fired from Bridgewater Associates. They choose to leave because they don't want the accountability. They don't want to talk about their results in front of others. And when you look at the study, the 400 percenters, it was a study of 638,000 high performers. And what it discovered was that at the other end of the spectrum, so high performance isn't a bell curve. You don't have these high performers in the middle and then we gradually cycle out. It's a law of diminishing returns. So you've got your high performers there and it rapidly drops. So when you get here, that's where you start to get the trouble at the bottom of that curve where there's a lot of ineffective. Now, I'm coming at this from a performance conversation. I'm not coming at it from a human point of view, right? So from a very human perspective, none of that matters, right? We all need to have empathy for each other. We all need to be out. There's no point 25% of the people on Earth functioning and leaving everyone in their dust. So I'm not talking this, but a deep performance model is a more human model because what it does, it brings everyone along for the journey. So we have 48,000 people in the company where the average of the 48,000 is much higher than a company of 50,000 that's run by 200 high-performance sociopaths, and everyone else just cannot keep up.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Tell me really quickly about your book and also how we can pick it up. I'm very interested. It says On Time, On Target. Is that your newest book?
This is the old book. Actually, this book is nearly 8 years old, but it's probably more relevant now than it ever was.
Right.
And I'm just putting the finishing touches on the upgraded. The intellectual property on this book just gets upgraded over 25 years. The intellectual property is the same methodology, same way of thinking we've been using for 60 years as fighter pilots, right? The big change is the automation, right? So the big change is technology. That's the big change to flawless execution. So On Time, On Target, you read this book, you're still going to get that fighter pilot mindset. You're going to learn about the different 3 leadership situations: leading the moment, leading the outcome, and leading people. They're 3 very different ways of leading. You're going to learn about flawless execution, the difference between creating work and creating action. And the next book is called The Afterburner Effect, and it's how a small group of fighter pilots influence 2 million people and 3,500 organizations to do 300% more. We like stats, right? So it's very different being a McKinsey going into an organization and working for a CEO and a fighter pilot going into an organization and working with a CEO. We get the insights that no one else gets because we're no threat. We're genuinely interested. And these people that are running these organizations are desperate for help.
I love it. It's huge, man. Huge, huge. How does someone find you to bring you into the organization and make us all high flyers and on time and on target?
Yeah, well, it's very much about bringing us into the organization, which is afterburner.com. We come at our program from a very unique perspective. It's very high energy. It's delivered in flying suits. It's very much about making an impact, because one of the other challenges is we're transmitting a whole bunch of information to a group of people. If they don't believe the information, if they don't experience, if it doesn't happen at a visceral level, they're not going to remember anything. So we created our Top Gun experiences that allow that immersion. From there, as you would imagine, 95% of organizations say, yeah, I've got this, I'm off. They're the 19 NFL teams that don't win the Super Bowl. A few companies lean into it, they invest in it, and they go, you know what, this actually has legs. And then we start to get the flying suits off, put the polos on, and we start working with these organizations to get the individuals thinking different. So the fighter pilot mindset, and then working together very differently, a way of working, which is the flawless execution method. So when the way of thinking and the way of working come together, that's magic. And just as a side note, you would have seen Top Gun, the movie. You see that Maverick and everyone flies around with other airplanes. They're always a team, right? They're never flying by themselves. And the whole wingman concept, what brought that into the pilots 100 years ago was, we didn't realize it, but when you look at neuroscience now and how the brain structures work, as pilots, you need one of you doing the thinking and one of you actually on the tools flying the formation around. So when you have these two roles, one person has situational awareness, so they're trying to find the context of the mission. They know where we're going, but they're sitting there saying, hey, lead, you're heading towards a storm. Hey, lead, there's two bad guys over there that are sneaking in, and these guys aren't a problem anymore. Like, you've lost situational awareness because you're so busy on the tools. That's what happens with leaders. You're so busy focusing on one part of the business that the other part of the business is really going to hit you in the ribs. So we have this fluid leadership model, this leading in the moment, where you always have two pilots with the authority to take over, so we don't end up just doing busy work. We're always doing the right work at the right time. So that's a big part of the neuroscience. There's multitasking, but we haven't quite got to the point yet where we realize multi-thinking is even more important. Then you want to take it to another level. It's the connection between the emotion, the thought, and the action. And fighter pilots are very good at that as well. It goes down to that. You're never frustrated in a situation that can be better. You're just going to fix it.
Love it. That's a whole nother episode. We got to do another one, Boo. Man, I appreciate you. This has been absolutely, one of the most interesting episodes I've done, because I basically just listened and I thought about all the areas that we struggle with potentially. We can change the game on, and some of my clients, what they're doing wrong, some of my friends, some of the startups I invest in. So really appreciate you being here. Thanks a lot.
Hey, it's a pleasure. And it is that simple. If you're frustrated, if things are slow, if you feel like the intention is not connecting to the action, there is an absolutely very simple way in which to close that gap so you don't feel like that. You don't have to live with that.
We're going to talk offline about that. Thank you, Boo. And that brings us to the end of another great episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. I want to thank you for joining us and hope you took away some valuable insights to apply in your professional journey. Don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss out on the next great conversation. I promise it'll be good. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps others discover the podcast. Better leaders mean better working environments. Better working environments leads to happier people. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm Avetis Antaplyan, and this has been the Tech Leaders Playbook. Keep leading, keep learning, keep giving, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, stay inspired, my friends.